is there are these people that think, okay, I could just hop on a sailboat. No, you can. But the truth of the matter is that having the capacity to be able to, make a positive direction and to be able to figure out where you are and to repair your boat for yourself and to have the skill sets to be able to navigate, those are the things that make sailors great. And those are the things that I think you don't hear about. History doesn't remember sailors that go down with a boat. History remembers the sailors that make it back to shore.
That is so true. Even if they spent a month in a life raft, that's what history remembers.
Exactly that, yes.
So today we have the privilege of being joined by a sailor, a cook, a writer, a videographer, and frankly, he doesn't know which one's his favorite, so he seems to do all four in abundance. We're joined by a guy who's done big things and got big things to come. Welcome to the We Get Outdoors podcast, Chris German.
Why, thank you. I can't tell you how happy I am to be here.
I know, especially after my debacle of no power last night, we've finally met. How good is that?
Well, you know what? Life's opportunities are presented in such strange and unusual ways that when things like that happen, you just have to smile.
That's it. I want to start on your biography on your podcast, on your website. You say you're a sailor, a cook, a writer, and a videographer, but you're not too sure which.
Yes.
However, one empty day tomorrow, nothing to do, and you can choose one of them. Where do you start?
Generally, if it's an empty day, I'm cooking, actually. And I actually, that's how I keep this massive, well-fed girth of mine happening. But no, I mean, the truth of the matter is that I've been, because I have ADHD profoundly badly, and I also I'm a Gemini. So the truth of the matter is I bounce all over the place at all times, and I have a really difficult time just kind of keeping my whole brain all in one spot. So I have to have a variety of things in my life. And I'm getting better. I'm on medication now, and I've had therapy, and I'm doing much better with that. But yeah, so yeah, I mean, I love the idea of spending an afternoon cooking, but the idea of also maybe being a chef on a boat someday and going to live on a boat and making a floating restaurant. I got all kinds of good ideas that I'd like to bring it all together with. Right during the daytime, make dinner at night, and then sail into the sunset. That's what I want to do.
That sounds incredible. Now, you just mentioned ADHD. And by the way, we're going to get on so well because if I focus on something for more than 45 minutes, my wife would call it a miracle. So then I have to do something outside. But you mentioned life with ADHD as an adult. Have you always known you've had ADHD, or is that something that's been recent, or how did you come across it?
No, actually, I have a whole blog out there about this, and I did a whole series on ADHD in the grown-up world. But the truth of the matter is that I was part of this group of really smart kids, and that one of the things that really was a deficiency for me, because I was so smart that I got my way around things, and I never had to deal with the issue of ADHD as a student or as a younger man. The only time I really ever realized it was a truly debilitating part of my life was when I tried to get married. And I got married to my wife, and I couldn't keep a conversation together. And I was just a bear to live with because I had all these different things going on in my head. And so he initially had me tested to see if maybe I was Asperger's or I was on the spectrum in some way, shape, or form. And as it turned out, I blew off the charts with the fact that I was ADHD. And it really is, knowing now what I have and knowing that, it really explains a lot of my difficulties in this world and why it took me to be 45 years old before I really started being an author, and why I never had a real job. I was a sailor for most of my life because I couldn't use my college degrees, and I couldn't, I couldn't sit in an office, and I couldn't sit in a seat, and I just was not capable of doing those things. But now that I'm a grown up and as I said, I'm on medication, and I'm getting therapy for it, and I'm doing some pretty cool things, I think, with my books and with my movies and with my editing and with all the other videography stuff. And the truth of the matter is I don't have to cook myself in the sun anymore and hoist boats up a giant mud bank anymore.
I've been there. I know what you're talking about, especially with hoisting boats up muddy banks. So how have you balanced all that out? Because you are an author. I mean, you've got 3 books, or coming on to be 4 soon? Is that right?
I have one book published. I have one book that is currently trying to find a agent slash publishing house because I'm going to be using that book in conjunction with the Great Loop movie. It's going to be kind of a thing between those two. And then the first book, which is Whither We Tend, that's the one that's published right now. I actually have that 3/4 of the way written. The second book is called Governments of Men. And the first book takes us in 2024, it takes us through the political machinations of, imagine the people of January 6th, if they had their success and they did organize together into a war-like thing and they had their idea to secede from the United States and all that kinds of good stuff. It's what I presuppose what it might look like. And I wrote it into a book. And then the other side of that is a guy named Simon Gates, who he's an insurance guy from the town of Stratford, Connecticut, my hometown. And the idea is that he kind of gets wrapped up in all of the political machinations that are happening, and he sees something's coming down the pipe, and it scares the hell out of him. So he decides to take action and do something to try and protect himself from what's happening. And he gets pulled into this battle, which is happening when he decides to join the United States Army as a 40-year-old recruit, which is just a weird thing to happen. But that's the point of political dystopian things. You could do weird things in a book. But so that's the first book, and then the second book, they decide it all happens, and the war happens, and they move an aircraft carrier into the Gulf of Mexico and fire on the city of Corpus Christi, and we have all kinds of good stuff. The Lake Powell, where I'm living right now, it turns into a concentration camp, and so the second book has got a lot more violence and anger and war type of stuff, but it's pretty fantastical stuff.
So we do have to talk about the outdoors and sailing at some point in time. But what you've just described to me in those two books sounds like a movie.
Well, it could be a movie, but as I said, I can make movies and I can make books. And I spent a lot of time thinking about the words in the books. So you're going to have to really get a really phenomenal lead man. You're going to get me to convince that and make that into a movie.
That would be, well, I can almost imagine it in my mind's eye. The way you describe it, I'm like, wow. Aircraft carrier bombing Corpus Christi and, concentration camp on Lake Powell. My brain is spinning. That's phenomenal.
Well, that's the idea, isn't it? That's the whole purpose of a book, is to get your mind to do incredible contortions and go all kinds of different places.
I love it. I've just finished listening to, on Audible, Napoleon Hill's book. I think it's called A Conversation with the Devil. And it literally is that, a conversation with somebody he presupposes to be the devil. Talk about making my mind do mental gymnastics for 6 hours while driving. My goodness me, that stretched me.
Well, if you've got any long trips ahead and you would like to check out Whither We Tend in Audible version, yours truly is the guy that voiced that one. And it's available on Audible, and you can take a look at it for free with Audible. And I do a lot of different voices, and you hear actually 30 of me all walking in unison during a training event during the Army, during Army training. So it's an interesting. Listen, if you want to take a look at it on Audible.
I'm in. I'm going to go do it onto my iPhone when we finish this conversation. I'm curious.
Outstanding.
I've got to give it a go. I've got loads of credits on the damn thing, so I'm going to go and use them. Now, so you've led this varied life. I see you've done PR. You've been a journalist. You've joined the Coast Guard. You've been a student. You've taught sailing. You've sailed. I mean, all these things. What was it in your childhood that brought you to the point of not putting yourself in a square box like most people do and saying, I'm going to get a degree and then I'm going to get a boring, shitty job for 40 years and then I'm going to stop working and be miserable? What was it in your childhood that permitted you to do that?
Well, I'm not sure it was a permission thing. It was more of a resistance thing. My parents, my father, both my parents were raging alcoholics. And they both, unfortunately, exited this planet a little too fast. They both hated their jobs. They both hated their existence. And they both said, you know what, kid, don't do what we did. And so I've always been hesitant, I should say, to just, knuckle down and become the Simon Gates insurance salesman, which is one of the reasons why I made him an insurance salesman, because I don't want to be that guy. But, I've had some really cool jobs and I've been some really cool places and I've done some really cool things throughout my life. also a nature or nurture thing, because I just couldn't do the job. I had the Subway job. I worked for Subway restaurants for a while as a PR guy, and sitting there at the desk all day long trying to figure out how to keep myself busy just drove me insane. So I quit that job and I took the job teaching sailing, and I did sailing for 30 years. And I realized now I'm getting a little too old to be sailing in small boats, and I need to grow up and I need to make some real money. I can't just sail the rest of my life. So I'm trying to make sailing into a movie.
Fantastic. And I want to come back to that because in reading your bio and going through it, it seems like your first major collision with the water was joining the US Coast Guard. But equally, you say you joined the Coast Guard and you then realized that the military and federal government is pretty crap.
Yes.
What was it that took you, let's go to the start. What was it that took you towards joining the Coast Guard in the first place?
Well, I joined the United States Coast Guard Academy out of school, and I was like, that's the curse of being a smart kid, is they try to do stuff like that. And everybody said I was going to be an engineer, or I was going to be an architect or something like that. And I just don't have, me and calculus never got along. So I was a great disappointment to my parents. My father really wanted me to be a military officer. My mother was interested in that as well. So they really encouraged me to go to the Coast Guard Academy. But very quickly into that, I realized it wasn't working for me. I got sick as hell because of my ADHD, and my body just kind of, I just couldn't keep up. And it just was more than my mind could handle. And so I decided, okay, I'm going to get out of here and I'll go get a normal education with it at a normal school. And, I just kind of bounced around and didn't really figure out what I wanted to be or what I wanted to do, by virtue of the fact that I wanted to do too much. And I just could not settle down to be a normal human being for the longest time, until I got married to Jennifer. And she saw something in me that I didn't even see in myself. And she said, you're a hell of a writer. You're good at all kinds of good stuff. Why aren't you doing that stuff? And so we really, that's when we decided to get tested. And I decided to get tested, and I went to that. I did all the various to sundry skill sets, and it turned out I was functionally challenged in a lot of ways. And in a lot of ways, it's liberating to know that I had these issues, and that the reason why I did the things I did was because of these issues. And now I know the reason why, but now I can also figure out a way to get around them. And I think for the first time in my life, I'm seeing some real success with my writing and with my ideas for shows and editing and all that kinds of good stuff. And it feels pretty damn good.
That's incredible. Congratulations. I love it.
Thank you.
Obviously, sailing put a big hook inside of you. What was that first time that you were like, sailing and me are meant to be?
Well, believe it or not, my father was a watercolorist, and he created a bunch of seascapes. But the man didn't know how to sail worth a damn. And we bought a boat together, and I very quickly realized that while he painted a sailboat, he didn't know how to sail a sailboat at all. And I was not doing much better myself. And so I kind of kept pushing towards the sailing thing, and went beyond that. And the one time I really clicked with sailing, the first time it ever really clicked with me, was I was in the Sea Scouts, which in my new book coming out, The Sailboat, it's one of the dedications that I make is to the Sea Scouts of America. And a guy named Captain Jim Ziga told me, he dragged me out on the boat, and he started teaching me to sail, and it just clicked with me. It just made sense for me. I've never been a big power boater. It just goes too fast for me. It's not my thing. But a sailboat that is, a good head of wind and cruising along at a good 6 or 7 knots, which is slow by everybody else's standards, that's perfect for my speed in the world.
How do you feel when you're sailing?
Well, it's for sailing for me, I've never really loved sailing in and of itself. It's the adventure of sailing. It's going places and doing things and seeing things. And that's what's always been so exciting to me about sailing. Is the truth of the matter is that you could step off the beach at any place in the world and get to someplace else in the world absolutely free of charge, as long as you know how to harness the wind. And it's such an empowering thing, which is one of the reasons why I started my not-for-profit back in the day to teach inner city kids to sail, because I really thought, how can you empower a child other than give him the tools to see the ways to get out of his miserable little existence sitting on a stoop someplace in the inner city, instead put them out there and put them behind the wheel of a sailboat and teach them how to pull in the sail and tell them you can go anywhere you want in the world, kid. You can just do it and just go. And that is, I think, one of the things that I like the most about sailing is that it is an adventure in and of itself. And you never know where you're going to land. You don't know how long it's going to take to get you there, but it's a great story in the telling the entire way.
Yeah. I've done canoe expeditions all over the world. And some of them, you think you know where you're going, and then suddenly you end up somewhere completely unique that nobody's written about or documented before, and have a mind-blowing experience. And so I guess for you, my question is, where's that place that you've ended up that is still today hangs around in your head, but you weren't expecting ever to find it?
Well, to be honest with you, it's been a number of places. I was on this big old sailboat, the Roseway out of Massachusetts, and we decided to part ways. I wasn't a big fan of where they ran the boat, and so he dumped me off on the shore down in Georgia. And I was in this wonderful little place, Cumberland Island, down on the Florida line of Georgia. And they have these wild, not really wild, they're domesticated horses that the Carnegies left there back in the day. And they are just left there to wander this island with these giant, massive mansions that are abandoned. And it's a national park. And I just got deposited in that place. And it was like, this is so cool. I got to see this. But then additionally, I mean, with sailing has took me to other amazing places just by virtue of you just have to go all these different places. So I've been to all these places down in Florida, and I've popped into St. Augustine, and I've managed to do most of the Chesapeake Bay and the eastern seaboard. I sailed pretty much from Maine all the way down to the Caribbean. I've sailed pretty much in every port up and down the eastern seaboard. And there's always something new, and there's always an amazing story to hear, or a cool person. And it's the adventure of it all that I love so very much. So much so that I said, you know what, I have to go find some new adventures. And my next goal is to get up and down the Pacific coast and go sail the entire Pacific coast.
Fantastic. Seattle to Tijuana, here you come.
Exactly that. And there's supposedly like blue whales down there near Tijuana that in the wintertime you can go down there and just sail with like giant blue whales underneath you. I want to do that.
Yeah, I can. So I've taught and coached a lot of sea kayaking in my time, and I used to get flown from the UK very frequently across to the West Coast to go and coach sea kayaking. And September, October time, you can be on the Pacific coast, on the Oregon coast, and be kayaking or sailing with grey whales and dolphins and pelicans, and then you can go down to the Sea of Cortez, Baja, Mexico, and you've got the sort of wintering ground of orcas and the biggest dolphin pod I've seen in my life before, where you just sit there for 50 minutes with these dolphins just swimming past you. Just absolutely incredible. I mean, go tomorrow. That's my best advice.
Well, and that's exactly it with a sailboat. I mean, you can go places that you can't go with a powerboat. And that's not to say you can't kayak there. You can. You just have to kayak a long way. But that's where the virtue of having your own power to do it is. You don't require petrol to do it. You don't require, a motor or anything like that. If you have the wind to take you, or you have your back to take you, you can go as far as you want to go and get to the place where the wild things are, and get to the place where, you don't see these giant sunfish and these giant whales. And, you can't even see the pollution problem that's happening in the middle of the oceans if you're relying on power. But if you have a sailboat, you can see all of these things. And it gives you such a better perspective of the world when you get away from the things of man and look back.
That is so, so true. So, Chris, one of the things I really love about your website is you have things written on there that most people think but aren't brave enough to commit to. So you've taken a big step and bashed the government and the Coast Guard. Well, most people aren't brave enough to do that on their website. And by the way, that's a massive thumbs up from my perspective. You also,
well, thank you.
You also say that sailors aren't normal on one of your web pages. Tell me more about why sailors aren't normal.
Well, sailors, there's a little meme that goes around. I've seen it on a bunch of the sailing pages. And a little boy is sitting and he's talking with his mother. He says, "Mommy, when I grow up, I want to be a sailor." And she looks back at the little boy and she says, "You can't be a grown-up and a sailor." And it's true, because, there's a certain amount of playfulness. There's a certain amount of adventureness. There's a certain amount of immaturity if you truly believe that you can spend your life sailing. And I kind of learned that in a hard way, and I tried to be a sailor as long as I possibly could. for a living, and it's not a great way to make a living, but it's a great way to live a life. And I got to learn all these different things and see all these different things and do all these different things. And the truth of the matter is if you tell somebody you live on a sailboat and you're sailing to someplace else, they look at you strange. They don't treat you like you would be a normal 9 to 5 dad that sits in the car while kids are playing soccer on the Saturdays and stuff like that. You're glitched off a little bit. And that's the thing I like about sailors so much is they all have their little glitches and their little peccadillos, and they're all a little bit different and a little bit tweaked in the head. And as only somebody that can spend 15 hours not talking to anything but a seagull in the middle of the sea while being becalmed, it makes you a little crazy and you're a little bit tweaked out in the head. And so, it's the tweakage of people that I think is one of the coolest things about being sailors.
Yeah. I'm going to have to admit something now that I have sat way offshore on a sailboat on my own, having quite a lengthy conversation with myself and then crying on almost more than one occasion, because it's incredible and incredibly overwhelming and incredibly everything all at exactly the same time. It's like somebody's taken every emotion you could feel, got the volume control and cranked it to 10 out of 10 for everything all at the same time. It's absolutely amazing, and the only person you can rely on is yourself. Then you've got to sort yourself out and sort out the world about you, and it's liberating.
Well, and it's liberating when you get back to shore and you realize you made it. Because if you don't make it back, it's not liberating. But the truth of the matter is that if you are stranded out there, and I've been on sailboats where I had a giant wall of wind blowing 80 knots coming down at me with hail and thunder and lightning. And I realized I may not come out of this. And there's been other times I've been sitting out there in 90-degree heat without a breath of breeze. And you're wondering, is this going to be my end? And it's not that you want to die. It's not that you want to leave, but it gives you a chance to really look at yourself in a very introspective way when you're not talking and you're not listening to the chatter of the world behind you, and you don't have your cell phone and you don't have the television running and you don't have the radio, because you have nothing out there. There's no connection to the world at all. And you're sitting there by yourself, just looking at yourself. And it takes a special person to really look in their own soul and not cry.
It's true. There's a English guy, an old guy. I think he's about 70-ish now, who's sailing around the world at the moment. Mad old sea dog. He's got a YouTube channel. If people should go check it out. I don't know him, but he crossed the Pacific. So without going to the Galapagos, he left Panama and headed out to, I guess, French Polynesia, and got stuck in the doldrums. And it took him, will I get this right, something like 67 days to cross the Pacific from Panama to there, where normally it takes 20 to 30 days. And he's completely on his own on a old battered boat that's held together with duct tape and wire ties. And, and my hat always goes off to those people who are willing to go, well, we're just going to go give it a go and we'll get there one day. I think it's incredible.
Well, and that's been the bane of my existence in a lot of ways as a sailing instructor for most of my life, is there are these people that think, okay, I could just hop in a sailboat and go, and you can. But the truth of the matter is that having the capacity to be able to, make a positive direction and to be able to figure out where you are and to repair your boat for yourself and to have the skill sets to be able to navigate, those are the things that make sailors great. And those are the things that I think you don't hear about. History doesn't remember sailors that go down with a boat. History remembers the sailors that make it back to shore.
That is so true. Even if they spent a month in a life raft, that's what history remembers.
Exactly that. Yes.
So I've personally found that the outdoors has shaped me as a human being, from who I was in my teenage years to where I am now at the grand old age of 45. How has sailing shaped Chris as a human being?
Well, I think it has shaped me, but I don't know how it has. It's kind of like the frog in hot water. You put the frog in cold water and heat the water up, the frog won't think to jump out of it. But if you put the frog in hot water, the hot frog will jump right out. I've been in that cold water, and the water has heated up around me, and I haven't really seen how it's changed me. but I do know that it has somehow, and it's certainly directed my way at looking at the world and my problem solving skills and all the different ways that you can handle interpersonal relationships and all that kinds of stuff. It's definitely had some sort of effect on me, but I don't know if I can truly quantify what has changed because I've changed with me throughout all the years. But I do know I don't want to ever stop doing it. And I don't want to ever give up sailing. I don't want to have, and I'm really learning that now that I hate to use the word stuck, but I'm stuck here in the middle of the desert in the Utah desert without a sailboat anywhere near me right now. Although there's a tremendous amount of wind and there's a lot of water, but there's nobody sailing here. And I think that's just such a travesty. I was thinking I wanted to create a video series about sailing in Lake Powell. I can't find a boat out here to do it with. But it's one of those things you don't really know that you missed it until you don't have it anymore.
Well, I was just about to say, the opposing question would be, how do you think your world would be now without sailing? And you don't have to answer that question, but it's probably the one that would give some of the answer.
Well, I don't know how I would be without. I presuppose it's like a George Bailey question. It's a Wonderful Life. What would your world be like if you never went sailing and you get to look at your world and Gabriel comes down and grants your wish, and all of a sudden you're wandering down the street and you find that you're sitting at the insurance agency and you're 20 years older than you were right now, and you got the 2.5 kids and the dog at home with the Volvo and the big house and all that other good stuff, and you got the stable lifestyle. And I think ultimately, what in me, it would irritate me. It would eat at my soul to do that, and it would make me feel like I didn't live what I was supposed to do. So this is just who I was supposed to be, and so. I don't think I need Clarence to come down and show me that world because I don't want to be in that world.
Fair enough. That's good. That's good. So listen, there's lots of people decide that they're going to have sailing in their life. And it appears to me that there is, and maybe they're going to live on a sailboat as well. And it appears to me there's two very different sorts of people out there. There is, I'm going to say it's the Australians, which probably is so generalist it's ridiculous, but I've identified a whole bunch of Australians who make some money, buy a boat, have no idea how to sail, and go, right, we're leaving the Mediterranean now, we're going home. And they've never done a course, they've never had any instruction, they've just got a boat and away they go. So there's those people. And then also I know of some people who've got sailboats who've taken 10 years doing every program and course possible, in person with the most experienced people on planet Earth, all the right instruction before they get going. So what do you think is your best advice to people who want to go and include sailing in their life and want to go and have it as a fun thing to do?
Well, I think it's funny that you blame Australia for the credit card captain, because that's what we call them here in the United States. You have the money to buy the boat, but you don't ever think to get any education in the boat. And they hop out there and they go sailing. There was a horrible story a couple of years ago of a couple that were sailing out of Florida, and they wound up grounding their boat and ripping the keel off, and they sunk out there. And then the Coast Guard gave them a great big bill for cleaning up the boat. And then they put it out there that they had sunk their entire life in savings into this boat, and then they lost the boat. So that somebody did a Kickstarter campaign for them, and they wound up getting all the money back to go buy another boat. But they didn't ever think to get sailing lessons. Give them $1,000 and send them to a sailing school before you give them another boat, is what I think. But at the same time, I don't think it's a great idea to spend your entire world in sailing class, because you don't learn anything if you're always in a protected environment. And smooth seas never made a good sailor. I've had sailing students that have been in the same basic sailing class for their entire lives, and they will never stop being basic sailors because they never try anything hard, and they never go anywhere else, and they never experience anything else. So I think you have to have enough adventure to say, I'm going to go beyond my comfort zone. But I think do everything that you can to have the tools to handle the situations that will arise once you get outside of your comfort zone. That is what is going to make the ideal sailor. But also right now, I mean, with COVID-19 and everybody being locked in their house for the last year, there's a huge push right now. It's very difficult to find a sailboat right now. You cannot find a sailboat to buy right now because so many people, at least here in the United States, I don't know if it's happening over in other ports out there, but the truth of the matter is that, so many people want to just hop on a sailboat and go. And I think we're at a time in our history and where it's never been needed more. And it's that healing factor of just pulling in the sails and grabbing the tiller and just going. There is something to be said for making a person whole that way.
It's so true. I've through what I do with We Get Outdoors, I meet lots of people like yourself, and what I've been noticing over the past 12 months is if you're into or want to get into sailing, you can't find a sailboat of any quality for any reasonable money anywhere on planet Earth at the moment. They've gone. What's left is the secondhand nonsense that you really don't want to buy, unless you've got the amount of money you spent on the boat to go and extra to go and reinvest in bringing it back up to something that's seaworthy. But equally with the homesteading, sort of small holding, going and living in the country in the middle of nowhere and having some chickens and a cow and that sort of thing. You can't get hold of seeds and gardening equipment and so on and so forth, all as a result of COVID. I think people has finally started to realize that the cubicle job that gives you some money every fortnight, every 2 weeks, or every month really isn't all it's cracked up to be, and there's more to life.
Well, and just look what happened with the what was it? The Oscars, I guess it was. Nomadland took top honors at the awards, and it's a story about people hopping in a van and living the migratory lifestyle and working in Amazon and having these menial jobs, but they have the freedom to go wherever they want to go, and the freedom is important to them. And that is, I think, whether it is in a camper van or it is in an RV or it is in a sailboat, I think they're all the same. It's all the same motivations, which is to say, you know what, I don't have to keep up with the Joneses anymore, and I don't want to have my life defined my mailbox and my driveway. I want to go see things. I want to go do things, and I want to experience life because life is just too damn short. And if I'm going to miss it with COVID-19, then I'm going to go do it. And if I didn't miss it with COVID-19, I'm going to go do it now.
It's fantastic. I often think the motivation to go and make a change in your life is some form of extreme pain. Often is the biggest motivator to give you a kick in the arse to go do something. And maybe the past year has been a kick in the arse for people who said lots of things and taken no action to now go and take action. What a crazy! Well,
I tell you, when I ran my not-for-profit, one of the things I had an adult program, and invariably the adults that came into my program were people that had just had a major illness or had just had a divorce or had some other major life change, and they said, you know what, I'm going to learn to sail now, and they make that decision to jump towards that after having a major life event. Well, I think we've had a major life event as an entire world with COVID-19. And so I think it makes a lot of sense that there's this massive migration of people away from the standard and normal to let me be a little bit different because I've been living this whole life for too damn long and I want to go out and do things.
I think so. So sticking with the sailing theme, the Great Loop, tell us all, yes. What is it? Or, I mean, I know it's going to be a movie or a docu-series, but what is the Great Loop all on its own before we get into that bit?
The Great Loop is a 6,000 plus mile loop of navigable water which surrounds the eastern part of the United States. It started with a guy named Ken Ransom back in 1898. He died from all these different ships captains about these different canals that had been built over the time, and that he could actually sail from his little place in Michigan down through the Great Lakes, down the Mississippi, down through the Gulf of Mexico, around Florida, up the inside coast of the eastern seaboard, and then make it all the way back around. And at that time, he chose to go through the Hudson River, which was the rivers of New Jersey and the rivers of New York were very different in 1898 than they are now. And so he went up through that way, and he went around. He didn't do the St. Lawrence Seaway. The St. Lawrence Seaway didn't even exist in 1898. So now what I'm planning on doing is taking 5 sailboats with 5 teams of sailors that we will decide basically from the internet, where they're going to say, I want to learn to sail. We'll teach them to sail, and we'll put them in these boats, and they will sail that 6,000 mile loop. But this time we're going to go around out to Newfoundland, up through the St. Lawrence Seaway, and then back down through the Great Lakes and that kind of thing. It's going to be a year of someone's life that they will spend on a sailboat, and we'll give them all the tools that they need to be able to be successful to this. But they will also they'll become basically, if you've ever watched SV Delos or Sailing Nomad or whatever all those people live these YouTube lifestyles, and they have these social media followings, and they have these wonderful things. Well, we're going to encourage these people to do that, to make their way around and tell their stories. And as they're doing that, we're going to film the whole shebang, and we're going to tell a giant story set on top of Ken Ransom's experience with his Great Loop, the historical ramifications of it. And we're going to tell this whole story of all these people and all these boats and make it happen in a giant 8-hour documentary.
It sounds like the world's biggest logistical nightmare. not 8 hours, but to pull it off.
Well, it could be the amount of video footage we're going to have to get is going to be insane amount of video footage.
Yeah.
But the truth of the matter is that, right now everybody has cameras, everybody has a cell phone, and it's so easy to take massive amounts of video. There's GoPro cameras, there's all kinds of ways that we can get this footage. So we'll be able to assemble all the footage. That's the big challenge. But the easiest part about this is sailing, I think. And we'll give the people the tools that they need to sail, and they get to live the sailing lifestyle and be filmed doing it.
The hardest thing, and I'm not too sure how you're going to overcome this, but this is my experience of filming a lot of adventures, is that the stuff you really want to get on film is when the seas are biggest, or somebody's having the biggest argument, or it's the scariest, or it's the most wow, or it's the polar ends of emotion, of positive and negative emotion, because generally that makes for really viewable content. Right. Equally, I've found those are singly, like when you're in ginormous seas and you're gripping onto that wheel in your boat with white knuckles and whatever else, the last thing you want to do is fish out a camera and try and film it, because you're just in survival mode.
Well, and that's the idea that we're working with Catalina, which is the only company that really can do what we're trying to do with sailboats. We're going to have 5 brand new sailboats made for this voyage, and we will actually fit these sailboats out with cameras and sound while they're being manufactured. So we should be able to capture most of those shit moments, I like to call it. Sorry, excuse the language. But we'll be able to capture most of those moments for the people on that boat. But then we'll also encourage them to tell us their feelings and to have, conversations with their followers. And, when they're sitting in port, telling the stories that they experienced while they're out to sea. So we're trying to get both layers of this story. One part's going to be automatically videotaped because of the virtue of that cameras will be there. But the other side of it too is we want to hear the human side of this.
Yeah. Now I'm pretty sure that there's people who are watching this now who are thinking, I want to come do this. So how, is there a route for them, or a route, sorry, if we're in America, for them to come and find a way of getting involved?
Well, the best way to get involved with it right now is to like us on Facebook, and we'll certainly be putting this video on the Facebook page. The Great Loop movie is on Facebook, and get involved, and that's the best way to get informed of what's going on. If you would like to submit a video for this, we haven't opened up the contest yet necessarily on who's going to be invited to be part of this, but we will select 20 people. And the idea is that when we do open this thing up, they will send us a 1-minute video explaining why they want to be on the Great Loop. I did this project already once back when I had my television station, and I had a sailboat that I just sold. I don't have it anymore, thankfully. So I did that, and I got like 100,000 different hits. We had 21 different people that got involved with this thing. They all sent a video in, and it was such a cool experience. But what we realized, it was too small, and we would have to turn too many people away, and we wanted to involve even more people. So I shelved that just before COVID-19 happened, thankfully. And then after COVID-19, we're going to do this, like I said, with 5 boats now instead of 1 boat. And we're going to still do the YouTube videos and the social media feed with this whole thing. And we're going to invite everybody that wants to get involved with this. just send us a video and we'll try to hash it all out after that. But ultimately, right now, if you want to get involved in it, go to our Facebook page and give us a like.
Fantastic. Well, we'll make sure the link for that and the Chartered Life and everything else goes down below. Is there who are you looking for to do this? Because somebody's got to give up, well, 12, not give up 12, but commit 12 months of their life to having an adventure of a lifetime. So who's your ideal people?
People are my ideal people. And I don't want to. Disney made a movie called Morning Light Project at one point. They picked all these wonderful, happy, healthy, white American men, and they put them all in the same boat, and they filmed them with unlimited budget. And they said, okay, go sail across the Pacific. And it was a very Disney kind of thing. But it wasn't really a true sailing book. It wasn't about sailing. Sailing's a much more visceral experience. Sailing's a spiritual thing. And so I want people that can appreciate that. And I think I can tell usually pretty quickly whether somebody has the ability to do it. Now, the question is if they have the ability, do they have the interest as well? And that's the purpose of the YouTube video, is to tell us, what is your interest? Why do you want to be part of this thing? Tell us your story. Tell us who you are, and try to make it interesting, because we're making good television here. We want to tell interesting tales of people. But ultimately, I want to have a diverse group of people. I want women. I want men. I want every race that can possibly be there, every sexual orientation that could be there. The sailing for too long has been a anti-other organization. It's been elitist, and it has been largely a white-based sport. And I really would like to see less white males and everyone else get involved with this thing.
It's interesting. I interviewed a black guy the other week, and he was telling a story about his first time going sailing. He thought it would be a great idea. And he had to leave the neighborhood where he was brought up and go into a mostly known to be white neighborhood, to go to a Chandler's with just white people in, to go onto a sailing program just full of white people. And he said everybody was the nicest they ever could be. He's still got friends to this day from that experience who still enjoy sailing together, so on and so forth. But he said that it was equally the freakiest experience of his life as well, because it wasn't the sailing that took him out of his comfort zone. It was all of the social factors involved with it that took him out of his comfort zone as well. I think it's superb what you're doing.
Well, and that's the big thing is that sailing is inherently should be a social activity. It takes multiple people to sail a boat. And you really ought to be social. And that's the fun part about going to a yacht club or going to a regatta or any kind of socializing event with sailboats. And the truth of the matter is that these socializing events that are largely sponsored by U.S. Sailing and the Royal Yachting Association, they're largely white organizations. And they are not very welcoming of people of other ethnicities or other genders or other sexual preferences. And and I don't want to make a movie about that. I want to make a movie about real people, really sailing, really living the lifestyle and telling their tale.
What a lifestyle. So you've written several books, and I see one of your books is called The Sailboat.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, The Sailboat is a story of a couple, Philip and Lucy Winters. I can never keep my names in my books made up. Philip and Lucy Winters decided they want to buy a 42-foot Endeavor sailboat. It just happens to be that's the same sailboat that I had, and I was trying to sell my sailboat, and I just sold that boat actually. But they buy the boat, they try to fix it up, and they realize very quickly that they don't have the skill sets to be able to manage such a project like that. And on top of that, the invariable, if I've seen it happen once, I've seen it happen 1,000 times, where a couple that is ordinarily loving and caring and happy, put them in a maritime environment, and they turn into backbiting, eye gouging, hating each other people. It can bring the worst out of a couple. And Philip and Lucy, they have a precarious relationship to start with, and the sailboat brings absolute the worst out of them. And they really beat the hell out of each other under the sailboat. But they managed to make it all the way down to Florida. They spend New Year's Eve in Key West and Christmas first, actually, on the islands. And they spend New Year's Eve in Key West. And then they decide to start heading out to the Caribbean, and they run into trouble and they wind up losing their sailboat. And I'm not going to tell you what they decide to do next because that'd be a spoiler alert. But it's basically a couple buys a sailboat, hijinks ensues, and boy, we all know that story. And it's a great tale about what it is for a couple to own a sailboat.
That's incredible. We have in the canoeing world, where you have a couple in a tandem canoe, we often refer to it as the divorce boat. That's often what we refer it to, because two people going in the same direction but going opposite ways at the same time is quite a spectacular experience.
Well, it's story. It's one of the chapters in the book. They're in sailing class, and their sailing instructor tells them that we can't have married couples in the sailboat. And that's always been my policy in my sailing classes, that I will not allow married couples to sail together. And there's a couple reasons for that. The first reason is, if they're going to, everybody always in couples, somebody always has the remote, somebody always drives the car, somebody always is in the alpha position, and somebody else is always, not in the alpha position. I'm not going to say they're less than that, but the truth of the matter is, you have existing roles in a relationship. And if you bring those existing roles into a sailing class, and somebody's always on the tiller and somebody's always on the main sheet, or vice versa, the other person is not going to get the full experience. So you're not getting the good bang for your buck. The second issue of why you never put a couple in a sailboat is, ultimately, what you're going to learn in that sailboat should stay in that sailboat. And the last thing you want to do is have a giant argument in the sailboat and bring that back home with you and have a miserable life at home afterwards. So if you learn separately and then come together with sailing after the fact, you can be a happier couple with sailing. So I make a very big point in the book of saying the sailing couples the married couples cannot learn to sail together. It is a horrible experience for everybody if you do that.
I got employed by a Canadian couple to help them with their whitewater tandem canoeing. Must be about 12 years ago now. And if they're watching it, I love them both dearly. To be honest, after 2 hours, I realized that I was in for the next day and a half was going to be more like be nice to each other marriage guidance counseling as opposed to canoeing. And it's amazing, after some solid marriage guidance counseling, their canoeing improved all on its own.
Well, and that's from an instructor's perspective. You see this totally. I gather is that you're not teaching half as much as you're being a marriage counselor and trying to get around those existing issues that are in the relationship to pass your sport or pass your skills on to these people. And it's a horrible experience from an instructor's perspective, and it's even worse experience from the student's perspective.
I know, it's crazy. It's crazy. Wow. So as an author, you've got your podcast, The Author's Exchange. Firstly, I want to say, if anybody is an author out there and they want to get interviewed by Chris, I suggest you drop Chris a message via Facebook or via his website. But tell us a little bit more about The Author's Exchange and what people could get from it when they stumble across it on Apple or Spotify or any other platforms that you're on.
Well, ultimately, the Author's Exchange is not half as much for authors as it is for readers. And if you're looking for a good book and you're looking for your next good read, the Author's Exchange is aiming to do just that. We've had, just finishing up our first season, we had 18 different authors on there, most of them independent authors. And the truth of the matter is there's a massive sea of books out there right now. There's a massive publishing wave that is taking over the world right now. It's a fascinating time to be alive, if you think about it, especially when you go back to the days of Martin Luther and his complaints that he nailed to the door of the church, and that was the way he got his words out there. But now we have this ability to put out a book every second of every day, and so many people are publishing books out there. And the problem with that is there's so many books out there, you can't really decide just from looking at the cover of the book. It's difficult to understand which books you should buy from the reader's perspective. So what we do with the Author's Exchange is our efforts. It's what we're trying to do anyway, and I think we do a pretty damn good job of it. Is we talk to these authors about the books, and we introduce the readers to the authors that are behind the books. We introduce them to the books themselves, and we talk about them in a half-hour program that airs once a week on Fridays at noon, New York time. And you can find out about a book, and it might be the book you want to read. But that's the idea of the entire series: is that if you watch all the episodes, you probably are going to find at least one of those books that you say, you know what, I need to buy that book and I need to read that book. I've had certain people that have bought every single book this season that I've done on the show, and they say, one of the great parts about watching the show is that they find out about different genres that they wouldn't normally read. They didn't know that they would like poetry, or they didn't know that they would like dystopian adult political novels, or didn't know that they would like horror books. And by hearing about them on the podcast, they get a chance to say, you know what, maybe that's an interesting book. It sounds like I want to buy it. And the truth of the matter is that you could buy a Kindle book for free with Kindle Unlimited. There's affordable ways to buy books now, and you can do a different book every damn day. It's just such a great time to be alive in the publishing world. So that, you know, and we're trying to take advantage of that wave of massive books going out there, and try to help be a guiding light for the reader to find the best books that we can find for them.
Mm. And I wanted to talk about that because it's so relevant to sailing. Because my experience with sailing is there's times where you're so busy keeping control of shit, pardon my language, that you don't know which way up is. And then there's other times where everything is so calm and placid and easy that I won't say it's boring, but there's hours of nothingness. And a good book at that point in time, there's nothing better than being sat at the back of a good boat with a good book on a calm day, cruising along at 5 knots, nice and slowly, and just losing yourself in a novel. I mean, other than a good whiskey, that puts a massive smile on my face anyway.
Well, there's nothing to say that you can't do a whiskey while you're reading a book either.
Trust me, I do.
No, but no, you're right, though. It is sailing books, and that's one of the reasons why books have persisted over the years. Is a good book can follow you wherever you go in this world and always be there to entertain you. A cell phone doesn't work particularly well unless it's got a Wi-Fi connection. A stereo system needs to have or a radio, I should say, needs to have a radio signal. But a book, you could be out 10,000 miles out to sea, and a book is going to be just as good entertainment value as it was 10,000 miles inshore, which is to say inshore, not 10,000. You know what I'm saying? But you know, and that's I think one of the values of having the ability to read and having the ability to take in these wonderful ideas and contort your mind to all these different stories that are out there. And you know, and if you are important, you do want to have somebody to kind of guide you through the massive number of books that are out there and all the amazing authors that are publishing their books. Maybe we can help you do that.
That's incredible. So on a personal question, there's many different ways of reading books these days. Your phone, a tablet, a Kindle, Audible, the old-fashioned paper version being read too. What's Chris's favorite version for engaging in the books?
Well, currently my favorite engagement, by virtue of the fact that it's so easy to get the books, because I don't have a bookstore here. I'm 350 miles from the nearest, Walmart. There is no way I can get books here in a timely fashion, and I'm churning through books right now in a way I never have before in my life. So I've been using my Kindle, and I download the ebooks, and I smoke through these things pretty fast. And what's nice about the Kindle is that it tells you how long the book is, and it tells you what your reading speed is, and it can kind of help you gauge how much time you need to be able to finish that book. And when I'm putting out an episode every week, actually I've been putting out 2 episodes every week, so I've been reading 2 books a week, sometimes more than that. It's a great way to churn through books in a hurry. But I wouldn't recommend the Kindle necessarily for offshore reading purposes on your phone per se, although you can download the book onto your phone, and then that could work for you if you don't have Wi-Fi as well.
Yeah, I spent most of my adult life traveling around the world, coaching and guiding and leading in the outdoors, taking people to cool places, doing things. And at one point in time, I remember that my travel luggage, I've actually had my travel luggage disallowed on many flights due to how heavy it is. You know, not the hold luggage, but your hand luggage rather, because of the quantity of books that I've got stashed away.
Too many books. Well, I tell you, let me quantify my answer on that, because it depends on the book. Because I have a couple of books that I would have to have printed copies of. Anything by John Cheever, I need to have my printed copy because they're a bunch of short stories. Additionally, Hemingway's Islands in the Stream. Those are my 2 favorite books in the world. And I have to have a printed copy of those books because, it's comforting to me. It's warm, it's tender, it's my go-to spot. So I will never buy an ebook version of anything by Cheever or anything by Hemingway.
Okay, good. Well, I'm glad we've got that cleared up. I'm glad we got that cleared up. So, Chris, I just want to thank you for your time today, but more than anything, I want to thank you for, I suppose, living an ordinary life in an extraordinary way. Your passion about everything you do pours out of every conversation, every question and answer. And that makes you a truly inspirational person to follow and engage with. And I think the world needs more Chris's who are willing to recognize that they shouldn't beat themselves up doing stuff that makes them unhappy. They're actually going to embrace who they are and go and do stuff that makes them happy and share it with the world. And not only is that brave, that's truly inspirational. So thank you for everything that you do.
Well, thank you for I don't feel particularly special, but thank you for saying it.
It's true. I'm not here to lie to people. So, Chris, if people want to follow you, engage with you, do stuff with you, read your books, where's the best place to engage with you? How do they go about it?
Well, if you're interested in getting any of my books or anything with me, thechartedlife.net is my website. You can see behind me, Charted Life, right here, chartedlife.net. That will take you to all my personal stuff. But if you want to get into the Authors Exchange, that is theauthorsexchange.com. And we have all the episodes up there and all the books and everybody that's been put out this season. And our next season will go up there as well. But then we also have Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn and all the other good social media. We're everywhere. You can find us on social media. And I'm kind of proud of the fact that, there's a lot of ways to find me if you want to find me.
Perfect. The FBI knows where to find you if they need you. I love it. So, folks, I want to encourage you all to go and engage with Chris, the Chartered Life, the Great Loop. Chris, if we Outdoors can help you in any way with the Great Loop, I'd be intrigued how we can help you, because it's a truly inspirational project. And I love it when people go and retread in the footsteps of history, but in 2021 or whatever it is. So if we can help you at all, please reach out.
Well, let's plan on this. Is once we finally get the boats going and we get this filming happening, let's invite you back and we'll give you a tour of all the boats.
That would be super cool. We'll
do that. We got to do that.
And Catalina would love you forever, so that would be even better.
Exactly that. Yes, sir.
All right, folks. So check out Chris. Chris, thank you for your time, and we look forward to a round 2 of this conversation. Hopefully, looking around 5 amazing Catalina sailing boats that are going to go and do 6,000 miles around the east of North America. How cool is that? Stay awesome. Thanks for your time.